Hi everyone, very sorry that I am late releasing this video. Welcome to my room anyway. I had a technical issue with attempting to release it previously, so hopefully this will work. Today we're going to talk about the question of the different worlds of the different types. Do types live in different worlds, and if so, to what extent? Right? And as you'll see later, this is also by way of addressing some of the questions or remarks that I got in the previous video regarding the question of purpose, saying, sure, INFJs need purpose, INFJs need meaning, but isn't it just simply the case that all types do need purpose and meaning? All right, so stick to the video and you'll see, hopefully you'll be stimulated by the discussion that is about to start. Don't forget you can get my book, The Ecstatic Soul, if you're willing to or interested in deepening significantly understanding of the INFJ type. Check the reviews, check the links below, as well as The Infinite Castle, my book of fiction. If you like Murakami, Kafka, Dostoevsky, and existentialism and magical realism, and if you're into the idea of supporting my channel, it's a nice product. Get it. Rumor has it the main character is an INFJ. You also have a link to my Patreon page. Support is very much appreciated, as you know, helps the channel a lot. Right, so in the video that I released earlier this week, I was trying to articulate the idea that INFJs, if we focus on the question, not so much of a type, cognitive apparatus or functional makeup, but we focus more on how they operate in everyday life, how they deploy a certain kind of phenomenology, if you wanted to use a certain technical term. We would find ourselves in a world where we have to describe values, interests, purposes, motivations, social interactions, and so on. So this is a realm that is not typically captured by the more technical dimensions of typology. Now, in the video, I was by way of also foreshadowing some of my discussions in chapter 3 of the upcoming book, or the book that I'm currently working on. It's not upcoming for a little while, but it's in the works. I was talking about just how important meaning and purpose were in INFJ life. And some of the comments seem to not completely get what I was trying to get at regarding, the specific INFJ case. And they said, appreciate all that you're saying, all that sounds very true, and the modern world is posing a certain number of challenges in relation to meaning and value, to say the least, particularly in the West, so on and so forth. But how is it different for, let's say an ISTP or an ESTJ than it is for an INFJ? Meaning, if meaning is part, if the search for meaning and meaningfulness and purpose is part of what it means to have a rich, fulfilling life, why would INFJs be exceptional here? Okay, so clearly it's on me to not have been able to kind of articulate the thought as well as I could have. And it's not that surprising in a way, because I'm kind of working on these thoughts at the moment in my book. So it's great to be able to wrestle with them and kind of get a better sense of when I'm not being clear enough, or when I'm not being specifically fine-grained enough to quite reach my goal. So let me just say this. I think that you can think of the different types, right? You can think of the different types not quite as living in different worlds, right? Because you don't want to say that an INFJ is literally living in a different world than an ESTJ would be, for instance, or an ESFP would be. This, which coincidentally can sometimes be a proposal of extremely relativistic philosophies, is not something that makes a lot of sense, because we just look at the evidence, we look at what's going on in the world, and we see that if we're INFJ, some of our best friends are not at all INFJs, that maybe we understand them and they understand us better than other INFJs do. We can work with non-INFJs. I mean, the whole world and society is articulated around the idea that we do share a world. Okay, so in a very objective sense, we share a physical world and we do share a social world. However, we could suggest that to experience the world as a person of the INFJ type, is not quite the same as experiencing the world as a person of a different type. And here, I think that's a useful concept that we could use is the concept of life world, right? So not just world, but life world. And it's just a single term, life world attached. I believe that the first time this term was used is in the works of the phenomenology inventor, philosopher Edmund Husserl. And it's been significantly useful to the philosophy of Martin Heidegger, and more recently, a philosopher who is still alive. He's old, but he's still alive. You might be familiar with his works. It's the work of Jürgen Habermas, and Habermas has done a lot to articulate a philosophy for modern civil society and life in the state, okay, in general. Very, very interesting conception of pragmatism. I mean, influences from pragmatism in Habermas's work and how he combines that with some more Kantian intuitions. But I'm not going to go into the technical details of his work. Nevertheless, the life world is to be distinguished from, if you like, the world of thought. So if you consider, you can have the view that says, okay, like a type has a certain cognitive makeup, meaning that they think differently than other types. Their thoughts are different, and the question of how to articulate this difference is the challenge of a particular theory. But the notion of life world displaces, right, the focus away from thought and onto experiences and values, right? So if you consider that the very activity of thinking is a kind of experiencing the world through the means of thinking, you could sort of infer from that life world actually is something that subtends the world of thought. Thinking is one of the things we do as an INFJ or as a person of another type. But the world of our experiences, the quality of our experiences, if you like, is something that involves us caring about things, being in certain moods, having certain purposes, finding value in certain meanings, in relationships, social interactions. So it's something that is very fundamental to our experience, but is not captured by thought alone. And that's what the life world means. And if we consider that different types have different life worlds, we can perfectly conceive that the physical world we share is the same, material world we share is the same, a lot of things, lots of features of the world are the same, allow us to operate, but that we have slightly different life worlds. Okay, and from this perspective, it becomes a lot easier to understand why I can say that meaning and purpose is a crucial challenge for INFJs in the modern world, and it is being assailed by lots of different processes, lots of different developments. If I say this, I am not saying that meaning and purpose are not important to an ISFP. I'm not saying they're not important to an ENTJ. In fact, I think that if you take the family of ENTJ types, it would be very tempting to say that purpose for an ENTJ is very, it's high in the ranking of the priorities in the ENTJ life world. But it's not going to be the same kind of purpose as the purpose in the INFJ life world. It's not going to be the same kind of meaning. There's other types where maybe the purpose will be slightly similar, but it won't be as highly ranked in terms of priorities. Perhaps for an ENTJ, purpose ranks higher than it does for an ISFP. Perhaps autonomy for an ISFP ranks higher than does for an ENTJ, okay? So when we talk about life worlds, we kind of take our distance, take a step back from the world of pure thinking, and we start seeing things, from a more phenomenological point of view. And so if you then limit yourself to the INFJ life worlds, one of the points of the book, of my future book, is to say that there is an INFJ life world, first of all, but also in this life world, meaning and purpose are in danger. Here's what we might be able to do to resolve this issue, okay? Now, another thing that I should also mention straight away is that when I say that different types have different life worlds, right? So we've moved from different types of different worlds, which is how I pulled you into this video, to different types of different life worlds. Now, I want to specify further that this is still a kind of simplification. The real articulation would be to say that every person is a life world, right? So the INFJ life world, according to the hypothesis that this is a thing, is actually more akin to a collection of individuals whose life worlds are sufficiently similar that they warrant calling this family of life worlds a type. And so you'd have a conglomeration of ENTJ life worlds that belongs to this type. We label it ENTJ, we label this one INFJ, and so on, okay? So that's the more accurate approach to this. It's more nominalistic in a sense that it focuses on the particular, the individual. And this is inevitable when you take an approach to experiential phenomenology, because of course the qualia of individual experience are unique, but you can look at family resemblances. When you move from family resemblance, where do you go to once you've talked about family resemblances? You do move, like I was suggesting right now, to a certain kind of skepticism toward the reality of types. It's inevitable because there is so much variety within different people that are still classified under different types. And if you consider that people who have those various dimensions to their life worlds are grouped under a family sort of classification, which is not really a classification. It tries to defy the rigid boundaries of type and, you know, the discrete nature of type and categories. You're automatically postulating that those boundaries are porous, and that if in this like phenomenological life world, someone who's a little bit outside still belongs to the INFJ type, they may consider themselves resonating most with self-descriptions of the INFJ persuasion, but they might be a little bit close to the ISTP as well, sharing some family traits with that. Maybe they have cousins in the ISTP family. So if you follow my analogy, you start realizing that in this understanding, and in fact, in my book, I'm still using the concept of type, because it's so much easier to talk about type as if it's just discrete, as if it's closed off. It's easier in articulating, you know, videos, speaking in videos. It's easier to write about that people understand it more straightforwardly. But it doesn't mean necessarily true to experience, okay? So in my current book, I'm kind of moving from this idea that there are discrete types to more loosely connected families, okay? From the point of view of the way we experience the world, there's still an INFJ family, but it's a bit more open-ended that maybe we accepted until now. Still, I would claim that someone who belongs to the INFJ family, but for whom meaning and purpose are of a certain kind, which I describe in the book, do not resonate at all. I suspect maybe you're in the wrong family. Maybe you were adopted. No, I'm joking. But anyway, so I wanted to conclude by just sharing a few words on the question of the compatibility of this view with the more scientific approaches to type that are growing on the internet, particularly cognitive type, and it's maybe the voltological approach that may be familiar to some of you, where I think it's really the only viable scientific approach to type, the one that has promise in terms of becoming a full-fledged, respectable scientific theory. It's still developing, but there's lots of features that indicate that it has scientific features, and I've made videos on that. Maybe I'll make more videos on this in the future. Why I want to mention this is because if you look at my approach, my phenomenological approach, my focus on experiences of people who identify as being of a certain type, as part of a family, clearly it's qualitative. It's in the domain of the literary and the descriptive much more than the explanatory and the scientific, which is completely fine. It's deliberate. It's what I prefer doing. Okay, I'm still interested in developments on the scientific side, because it's intellectually stimulating, because many people there are smart and nice. And also because, well, it's informing me from my own perspective, the qualitative perspective. I'm trying to see, can actually, there's not going to be obviously a blending of the two. It's impossible because different categories of theorizing. But maybe they can coexist. And in fact, if you at some point you take an interest in current discussions and cognitive type forums and discords, because it has this scientific feature of welcoming different hypotheses and sub-communities within it, it has this openness, it's essential to scientific spirit. We've seen the growth of what's loosely called so far, the spectral hypothesis about types. Again, we're speaking within the scientific approach of cognitive type, where on the basis of significant enough evidence scientifically, significant enough scientific reasons to have the hypothesis that type is actually spectral, that you're rarely ever just exactly discretely just this one absolute type. You're on a spectrum between 2 or 3 or more types. In fact, each of your functions are in fact on a spectrum between their polars, across to their polars. So instead of being FE, you're kind of more FE than TE, but you're on the spectrum. And that applies to the perceptual functions, and it applies to the introverted judgment functions too. They are, this is a hypothesis. It's slowly developing. We don't know where it's going to go. I just find it very interesting that if that spectral hypothesis turned out to win the day, maybe it could eventually be made to coexist with the phenomenology of families rather than types and their life worlds and the various traits that inhabit those life worlds. Okay, so I'll stop here and I'm going to upload this right now, so hopefully it will get across to you as soon as possible. See you tomorrow, guys. Take care.